The conversation you're about to hear does not necessarily reflect the personal views of all involved. We're here to start intellectual discourse in the Christian worldview. Hopefully, you can gain something from these second-rate saints. Enjoy the podcast.
I like that I could take everything that you just said and put it to a bad guy in a kid's movie. If you ever get targeted by Mormons, though, they'll send pretty girls your way. It's weird.
Or they'll get pretty girls to offer free Bibles on Facebook Marketplace.
And cookies!
Yeah, and it's... I hate it because they know what they're doing.
I mean, I'll take the cookies.
Because it would look like, yeah, man, I could do some cookies. It's been a while. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. This is episode 4, and we're actually a little bit out of it because we haven't recorded in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to remind myself of my own name. I'm Caleb, in case you're wondering as well. But I don't know the person beside me.
I'm Joel, and I'm also here, and it's for the podcast. And to my left...
Hello, I'm Colton. I was taken up off the streets. Please, someone. No, I'm kidding. And to my left...
I'm Joshua. I'm the 4th member of this podcast, and we are in my house.
You own this place?
You've made that joke before.
Wow.
Glad to see that I'm predictable. Seeing how we're predictable, let's just follow our schedule. Josh, have you read anything?
Yeah, I read a beautiful book called The Silk Roads.
Okay, what's it about?
It's a history book.
Oh, never
Classic
mind.
Josh fashion. So it is a history book on the Silk Roads, which were a series of destinations between Europe and Asia, usually along the Middle East, sometimes over the steppes, which is the mountain range that separates northern, like, Russia from the Middle East. And they were a way for these nations across the two continents to trade. And it was a beautiful exchange of culture, goods, spices, everything. And what he does a really good job of explaining is, like, this idea of globalism we think of as a new idea because of the internet, because of international trade and all these things. But it's just not the case. Globalism has been a thing since, like, 4000 BC.
Yeah. I audiobooked the majority of the book. I might have even finished it, if I can remember. There were some very interesting things like, the Greek temples in southern
India.
Oh, yeah.
India and
We've
stuff
talked
like that.
about this.
And Buddhism in Greece,
Yeah.
otherwise known as Therapeutica.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It seems as though the way he wants to retell history is specifically from an economic lens. And I actually really appreciate it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's far more... It sounds boring, and it's super not.
No, because what you like, this is like a wild version of this, like a wild example. But, like, for example, there was what became the Norse people at the time were collecting slaves. They were huge collectors of slaves early on, and sellers to southern Europe and then further into the Middle East. And they would collect from the Slavic areas, which they're called Slavs because the word slave.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, which is super
I think
unfortunate.
they took the Slavs because their word was slave.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually the reverse of the way you're describing.
They got a little confused.
But one year they decided to stop, like, because of problems they were having, and China had an economic recession.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the lack of slaves being traded across the Silk Roads. And so these two nations that never had contact with each other,
Distribution of goods,
affected each other's economy so drastically that they didn't even know what happened.
Yeah.
Like, that, like, Rome before Christ appears on the scene had laws against wearing silk that was traded from China during certain events because it was too lewd.
That's hilarious.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's wild that Rome put sanctions on China. Just to think about that, like the way we think about the ancient
because
world.
it was too sexy.
Because it was too sexy.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
To me, that's the best part.
Yeah. And so like you see these beautiful things, and then he also gets into like the effect of the Silk Roads was not just economic; it was also religious. So you can see the direct relationship between the spread of religions through the cities on the Silk Road, and how that kind of like the roads around Rome that helped Christianity, the word spread really fast,
Right.
or the unification of a language, having a path city to city that people travel across back and forth all the time allows ideas to just...
Well, that explains a little bit the Oriental Orthodox Church a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, and why it's just, if you see the growth of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and you see it just goes in weird lines across Asia. If it's across these lines, that makes sense.
Well, it is interesting, and this is even going to tie into our topic. It's almost like it's by design.
Wow.
That the early church actually grew. It was a urban religion that then went rural, slowly more over time. But it started in churches. Not in churches. No way. It started in house churches, Caleb. It started in cities.
Yeah.
And then it moved its way. The opposite's happening now.
Yes.
People in cities generally are more likely to lose their faith, and it's the rural areas that are maintaining their faith, quote unquote.
Does the book talk about this? Because that's an interesting
Which book?
thing.
No.
Because that's an interesting
It doesn't
thing to
take
talk
a
about,
religious stance.
No, it's just... But,
Right.
but this is just our segue into our topic, because we are talking about why do people leave?
Yeah.
What, like, what's the catch? Why, if we just went through what is and why Christianity, although the why was a bit of a gong show, but hopefully you suffered through it with us. If we know what Christianity is, we know why would you leave? And I think we're going to go through some little bit of our
The answer
personal
is
experiences.
You won't.
We're not getting into preservation of the saints.
Oh, that's not even what
No,
I meant.
that's you can't.
Or you were never a part of it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Anyway.
Yeah,
That'll be
let's not get into that. Mainly because I'm scared.
You're scared we're right.
I'm scared of
Anyway.
either one is right.
Oh.
But I think we're going to talk a little bit more like our personal experience, what we've seen, how we've seen that work. And then second half, we're going to get a little bit more into the statistics about it, some more reflected studies on it and stuff like that. But
I do want to touch on something that you said about the Silk Road thing before we start, and I
Yeah.
think it's going to be
Okay.
a bit of an implication when we talk about why people leave the church and this whole thing. Cities are more progressive, obviously.
yeah,
Makes sense, yeah.
Why do you think Christianity was seen as a progressive movement in places like Antioch or where they became big? You say these cities, they became big, and then they went out to rural towns.
because it was
Why did it move so fast?
Because it was a way to merge monotheism, which had become very, very popular in the philosophical schools, and it was a way to also ground things in what was actually seen, even by Romans and Greeks, as a more moral system. And that's one of the reasons why you had a lot of God-fearers in the New Testament, and you have a lot of that in the proselytes all around the Greeks who would come and hang out in synagogues. Is because they were jealous and appreciated the ethical system in Judaism. And I think you had, in Christianity, you kind of had this, like, it fit a bunch of needs from a bunch of different places, and it all kind of culminated in, like, hey, this is what Christianity is, and boom. It's almost like the world was prepped for it, but whatever.
Do you think
The fullness of time.
Wow.
Do you think that parallels the movement right now in academia, where there are Judeo-Christian values that are being recognized once again by philosophers or teachers, even historians, right?
Political
Seeing it as a net
commentators.
good. We talk about like Tom Holland, we've brought up on the podcast before.
Douglas Murray.
Not the actor.
Douglas Murray?
Not the actor.
Yes, Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray's a
Who's
big deal there.
not religious, but thinks that Europe needs to return to its Christian roots as a defense against other worldviews.
Yeah. Because he's alarmed because he doesn't know another way to defend.
Well, because there's no foundation.
Yeah.
Well,
Other.
I think he came along the same conclusion that many people are starting to get towards, at least many philosophers and higher thinkers and stuff, of, oh, wow, look at culture. There's nothing unifying us except for string and paper. And we think there is, but we take a lot of it for granted.
Yeah.
Duct tape, gum, and glue.
And while there's a reason why we moved away from Christianity as our cultural foundation, or at least We tried. We didn't do a very good job at it. We just pretended it was something else.
Yeah.
But in losing that, it means, like you said, the fear of other influences, not just like other countries and stuff, but just other ideologies that aren't based off of good moral principles.
Sure.
It's the idea that something is always spiritually forming you, and if we wanted to get in that, we could.
There's a reason why most countries were based around either ethnicity or religion back in the day. Today, it's not so much with secularism and stuff like that, but it's because you need a unifying force for a culture to work and for a society to work. And if you don't, religion is the easiest probably way to do that.
I don't know if I'd say a religion. I'd say an ideology.
Sure. I think
mean,
that
and of course,
religion's a
Anila-
convenient ideology.
But if you were to go historically, the way a culture's ideology, it mirrored in its religion and functioned in religion. And,
Okay,
I would say that those two things probably split more in the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're right. One or the other.
The reason why I say religion is because with ideology, say even democracy, the million different types of democracy, because everyone has a somewhat slightly different opinion on it. But you take one religion and then you put the weight of God behind it if you try to change it. Heresy, heathenism, apostatism, stuff like that. If you do that, then you're deviating. So a unifying force that can't be changed, super healthy for a society, as good or bad as it could be. That religion itself, because normal ideology
depends on that religion too.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
but-
look at communism and a billion different types of communism, even though they quote unquote want the same thing. Now, if say they worship Karl Marx as a god, then there would be
anything.
no division amongst communists, really, not to any major extent.
I mean,
We are deviating off of our topic.
we're doing something here. It got really interesting there for a
this
second.
is very interesting.
Well, you mentioned
This is me, Caleb.
yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Caleb here, to my left, mentioned that Christianity started in cities, moved to rural areas, and now we're seeing people move from cities to rural areas as the focus of. Sorry,
Those who are keeping the Christian
yeah,
faith.
and you're seeing the opposite. And you Joel mentioned that there is a liberalization factor of it. That Christianity was more liberal than the culture around it, so it
Back-
I
flourished
said
in the
I
city.
said
day.
progressive,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
but yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And that maybe today the reason why is because Christianity is seen as a conservative value instead of a liberal value. And that
Because of the changing of liberal.
yeah,
Sure.
And so what you're seeing is it's the same force behind it, but society has changed in the 2,000 years since the two options that you're seeing. This is a mechanism for people losing faith in these areas.
Sure.
Well, to go back a little bit, humanism really changed how people see certain things. And Christianity is a very proto-humanist religion. Like, there's a lot of, for humanism being the appreciation of the individual being.
So like a very postmodern humanism.
Christianity
Is
is?
that what you're talking? No, you're
Oh.
discussing
Yeah,
postmodernism as an opposition to Christianity.
In humanistic ways, because the Catholic Church revolted against humanism so hard, at least in certain areas.
Okay.
Protestantism was kind of seen as the humanist religion, and then Catholicism wasn't. And then from that came the Enlightenment. Directly response because of all the wars of religion and stuff in Europe. And so I think just as time goes on and technology advances, because people have become more and more extremist in their humanism, liberalism, even communism is a humanist ideology. Fascism, not so much. But the reason why they're so popular is because they say that every person has worth. And what Christianity does, it was a tool of the quote-unquote oppressor for so long that it means that I think that people are going against it because of that. So we have a lot of postmodern ideas and even modern ideals being like more individual, and Christianity is not a very... It is an individual religion when you get down to brass tacks, but it doesn't appear so culturally.
Okay. That's all big picture stuff, which I love, and we're gonna get back
Well,
to
I was gonna transition.
that.
Because let's do it.
Because the individual, as you mentioned, Christianity is an individualistic religion.
It is. At least compared to every other religion.
The Orthodox and Catholic lovers and parts of me that don't like me saying the previous sentence, but that's fine. Individual. It is definitely
individualism.
It is definitely Christianity is definitely your individual responsibility.
Well,
Exactly, yeah.
Well, that's the caveat that makes Christianity an interesting, not just religion, but an ideology. If you want to separate it into individualism versus collectivism,
Yeah.
it makes it
Which
difficult to
isn't super
categorize.
fair, yeah.
But if Christianity functions
But
in that
that's-
way,
Yeah.
why is it that we see people leaving? What is that progressive movement? And do we want to talk about that in a brainchild, or do we want to see how that manifests itself?
I don't think progressive is a good term to use.
Okay.
Just because
you're
of
right.
like how progressive as a just a term, progressive to progress is different from
implies that
Very
it's going
true,
somewhere
that
good.
you're going, that you have a destination.
Yeah, sure,
yeah.
that's good. Christianity is going that direction, but the political ideological term progressivism is just saturated with awful ideas.
Right.
Like
so, progressive in the time of the Romans, not necessarily now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because what I mean by that is like progressivism inherently is that there is no destination to arrive at. It's the process of moving forward.
Right. And that's
why
the good thing.
And that's why when anybody lands at an idea, they are now seen as the old heretic that needs to be removed because progressivism as an idea cannot land.
I see.
It has to
I
keep
like
going.
That. I like that.
It's true. Yeah.
So
you're right.
there's never a destination, even though it's heading towards one.
Well, the
and-
destination is constant change.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
So
just not changing to something
But
that already exists.
how does all of those things manifest in the individual abandoning their responsibility in the church? So we're talking about someone who is a Christian, and they move away from Christ.
Just to mesh the two ideas and bring it towards what you're trying to say. I think a lot of it is because we've adopted more radical Enlightenment values.
As a society?
Oh
Exterior?
yeah, absolutely. Postmodernism is just Enlightenment values on steroids.
No, I agree with you, but is it because as a whole, our culture believes that, and the Christians who
Generally,
live in
yeah.
that culture leave because of those?
I think that people don't actively go, I want to choose this over this. It's that it gets instilled in them over certain influences in their life over a long period of time, which I think we all understand and agree with.
Yeah.
But the idea is with history and culture, we started off, Christianity was the unifying factor. It was the unifying factor for pretty much all of Europe, as divisive as it was. It meant that they could go on crusades together, stuff like that. But as we started moving towards
Constantine made it the basis of his entire empire before the Roman world fell. So you're right.
True, yeah.
Because he did that, the Roman world and Byzantine Empire lasted so much
1,000
longer.
years into the future,
Yeah.
yes.
1100 if we count the Byzantines, yeah.
Yeah. But the culture changed when the Enlightenment happened, when Renaissance happened. Culture changed, religion changed. It no longer had this hegemonic cultural value system, although it still did in certain ways. It does seem that because of more recent stuff, that we've moved more towards these more extreme values of the Enlightenment, which are for good or bad. Things
Okay.
like progressivism.
Let's talk about the Enlightenment then.
Yeah.
Why? Well, isn't it the printing of Bibles, the more availability to the individual
That's
that
what
they were able to?
allowed for it, yes.
Yeah, once the actual Word of God got into the hands of people who could actually read it, and it wasn't considered a force to monopolize people with, which it still was used as such, but we were moving away from the Catholics grab on the state.
Yeah.
But that's a Protestant's Protestant for you.
With the Enlightenment, I'm just going to quickly go
We're
over
talking about big political stuff
Yeah, I'm just...
when we're trying to talk about individual relationship and why people leave.
Why people abandon their individual responsibility to Christ and now I'm all good with us going over the Enlightenment and how that affects stuff as long as we distill it back down to that.
I'll go simply.
Okay.
With radical humanism comes the idea of hyper individualism and personal responsibility.
I don't think responsibility is part of that.
I think
yes,
people want to be in control of their own lives, which implicitly
Self-actualization.
comes with, self-actualization, the pursuit of happiness, all those.
Yes.
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which are good things.
Yeah.
But because people didn't want the self-responsibility, they just didn't want someone else telling them what to do. With that came people nowadays, because they're given this personal responsibility. There's the culture of progressivism means, it changes. You don't have as much responsibility because the responsibility is that you just keep changing, which is inherent to humanity. With less responsibility on us and less reason to feel bad about what we're doing, I think that people start to adopt more hedonistic ideas, things that feel good and have less moral responsibility on them.
Sure. I don't disagree.
Okay.
I want to bring it back though, or not bring it back, bring it forward to when at least I think Christianity, and who was it? There's this Alistair McGrath writes a little bit about it, as does Christopher Hitchens' brother. What's his name?
Peter
Hitchens writes up about it too, where the decline in Christianity in the West, culturally, began at the end of World War I. Okay. That's his shtick. So then, with your overall framework...
Say sorry before that, but it really actualized roughly around that
Well,
time.
his whole thing was like, we never gave an answer for the horrors of World War I.
For the why, yeah.
And we went so off base that beforehand that when the world went wild, people were like, oh, Christianity has no idea what it's talking about, because we went so off base beforehand.
Yeah.
Because Christians straight openly in the pulpit were talking like, no, the kingdom of heaven is coming. We're going then. We're going to... They merged very closely with that utopian idea of the kingdom of God coming, and we can actually bring it on the here and now.
Right.
Sorry.
No, this is good. So I think for clarity's sake, I just wanted to mention that. So we've now talked about like the relationship ideologically between Christianity and the separation ideologically with like progressivism, enlightenment, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about you're now starting the discussion of Christianity being abandoned because of its moral nature, or not individual leaders' responses.
Not necessarily. Like,
okay.
I that is a thing that I wanted to mention, but I wanted to go from, okay, so that's it in World War One.
Okay.
And then it continues to decline. Yeah.
Lost of faith in the system, kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's many reasons. We drew lines in the sand and fought on hills that we shouldn't.
Right.
That's a big thing too. Like, the fundamentalist movement, in my opinion, has hurt us more than it has helped us.
Oh, I think I agree with that.
But so the last, let's say...
Do you think that the advancement of technology also helped with this?
Maybe, sure. I don't think it was a major factor, personally.
Okay.
Only as much as ideas are able to spread faster. That's it.
I think the only reason I bring it up, and I don't mean to interrupt you, is that because the spread of ideas could happen over things like radio or books or TV so quickly that the correction couldn't keep up. That the ones who were failing couldn't go, oh, no, this is why, and stuff. So new ideas, new whatever, spread like wildfire, and there was no force that could quickly counteract it.
Maybe.
Or it could before.
Maybe. But we're now, like, the four of us exist kind of at the tail end of where it seems to be the only... It seems as though Christianity now can continue to decline, but it's only going to decline so far until it starts to just now split within.
Right.
I think that's the next big
we're at the tail
loss.
end of that?
as far as I think in the West as we can go for the most part.
Fair enough.
I guess I should say we're going to lose. We can still lose a lot.
Okay.
But I think that we're getting to the point where it's the true and faithful are, let's say, they're more than half of your congregation.
Okay.
Because the rest of the people have left.
Maybe.
And that might just be my personal church experience.
Yeah.
I could be totally off on that. That might just be my experience.
I think the goalposts have shifted so much over the years, it's hard to say.
Sure. That's you know what? Absolutely fair.
But no, I don't disagree.
I'll retract my statement.
Yeah.
I do think that we're.
It just means
if anything, we're at a very. I think during our lifetime, we're at a very specific moment where because the culture has shifted and gone. Oh, we have no underpinning to help us maintain our Western values. Yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of different things, and cultures are beginning to wake up to the dangers of this quote unquote progressive, liberal, and all those values.
Yeah, so kind of like the idea of like when Superman's being pushed back by a supervillain that's stronger than him, and then he puts down his foot into the sand and it slows him down, like the decline.
I guess, yeah,
Well,
sure.
It's kind of like that.
Okay. Yeah,
where it's just
I
like,
get it.
It's actually the Christianity. There's been a pattern of repeated failures since the Enlightenment, and then in World War II, then the 60s, whatever. That then now Christianity is starting to, in the West, because the rest of the world's a different issue.
We're digging in, and we're
The West
still
world
losing
is starting.
ground.
But we're actually starting to
At least in
reduce
some
the
ways.
failures.
Yes, I think that's. I don't know if we're starting to, but I think that is
It's
our
becoming
challenge
more of a sentiment,
of our time.
yeah.
That is the challenge of our time. But I think that's going to. So that's the overarching.
Yeah, I was going to
story.
say we're taking the big step, and we could go on.
Well, no,
for
this is good
thing
because
for forever.
I think we need to start general, and then we can move down.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
I
the
agree.
general. I think that the challenge for us today is the Superman put the foot in the sand and slow the losses so that then we can start making gains.
Okay.
I think part of why we have these conversations is so that we can figure out how to do these things.
Well, that's the idea that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't we name just quickly all the things that we've said? Because we've said a lot of big political words, a lot of theological words, historical words.
Jesus.
Why don't we start like just naming quickly?
God.
What are the quick reasons the Christianity's failures or the
never
cultural
mind. I
reasons
take back
why
what I said.
we started to see this decline? You mentioned progressivism,
I think you mentioned progressivism, but
Okay.
yes, you're
progressivism, the separation of
I think the Enlightenment's the big one. To be
Enlightenment?
completely honest.
Yes. Here's the thing.
It
And I
offers
guess
so many different options.
You're right. My issue is the majority of the time that I've seen people walk away from faith. Like in my head, I agree. In my experience, I don't, because the majority of the time that I've seen people walk away from the faith is because of a perception of a limiting factor on Christ. And you could say, well, that's because of the self-actualization.
What do you mean by limiting factor on Christ?
Normally ethics. They don't like the idea that Jesus is Lord, and they have to follow him.
Right.
Meaning ethical
Well,
behavior.
this
Meaning,
is-
and you can say that. Oh, well, that ties back to. You can say that ties back to.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but well, it happened before.
Right.
It happened all the time beforehand. It happened plenty. It happened for Augustine several times in Confession of Saint Augustine.
Yeah. But
And so, like, it's not a brand new idea, and
You're
you
right.
could say that it's rebolstered with the Enlightenment. But in my in
exacerbated
just
at
my
least.
experience, it's the majority. It's like, oh,
Okay.
I don't want God to tell me what to
Yeah.
do with my money. I don't like the idea that God puts limits on sexual relations.
Yeah.
I don't
No,
like that.
you're
and,
right.
And that's why in my head I agree with what you're saying there, Colton. But in my experience, it's the main reason why people leave the faith is because they don't want Jesus to be king.
yes, I 100% agree, and that's been a problem since literally the beginning of time. Not just Christianity. It's the issue with just humans
it's the
in
gospel's
general.
insulting
Yeah,
because
sure.
you can't be king.
Yeah,
Well,
yes.
you're a bad
yeah,
king.
Yeah. That's true.
yeah. So the Enlightenment, the separation of ideas.
Well, partially what I brought up, which maybe I skipped over a little too quick. I didn't bring up anything about sociology or psychology because I don't want to get bogged down in that. But the idea of when I said things like people have personal they wanted the personal freedom, but didn't really think about the personal responsibility.
Yeah.
I think that while they never consciously thought about it or accepted that, because it's been ingrained into our culture with things like progressivism is more of a response to that issue. But because of that's why what you're saying, Caleb, about the whole people rejected God as king, and because they have issues with the moral things, is because they don't like being told what to do. And I think that Enlightenment values just made that exacerbated so much more.
Yeah.
Because it re-puts the focus on you're in control of your own life.
Yeah.
What's funny, though, is because although people leave the faith, they will normally latch on to other ideological things that tell them what to do.
Because humans can't handle being...
Right, because you have to be a follower.
Individual.
You can never be king.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes. Yes to all of it.
Yeah.
But let's think about it a little bit. Psychology and sociology is, I wouldn't say, the best way to approach why people leave the faith, just because it deals so much with intellectualism, and it's too close to trying to know the heart of man, kind of a thing, right? Like,
you think so?
It's trying to say, like, there's a kind of a, I think it's a fallacy, but it might not be as well. I don't know. But to analyze somebody's psychological state and say, well, that's why you left, does no good for anybody. Right?
I disagree.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of people I've talked to.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, I think so. And the point is, some people just don't believe in God, and they're too honest to say that they do.
Okay.
Right? Like, I've heard that from so many non-believers, right? Like, that's a thing. So when you try and break it down psychologically and say, well, I'm convinced because of this, and you're not convinced because you can't accept this, or you're not smart enough to comprehend this, or something like that. We fall into that trap if we try and look at falling away from a psychological or sociological perspective.
From
Right.
only so
I think
just so I can
yeah.
just so I understand.
I could be wrong.
Just so I understand, you're not saying there's no value in those things. You're just saying that can't be the only thing.
Yeah, focusing
There's
on that
value
as
in
the
understanding,
reason. Yeah.
how people think and how people interact, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that would be helpful to the study of why people fall away, but that can't be like our major source.
Yeah, sure. We could say these big movements like the Enlightenment or World War II could be sociological factors that might take away from belief in Christ, but ultimately it's an individual issue.
Okay, cool.
There are not,
yes, I'm on
there's
board,
no there's not like the board at your church is going to decide that together they're leaving the faith and then everybody just leaves at one time.
Yeah.
That would be a unique experience if that happened.
Okay, I
That's
agree.
true.
Yeah, I just need.
I'm just trying to
I
ground us back
kind of
in
agree.
where we are, which is Scripture and salvation.
No, fair enough.
No.
No,
Not that
this
we've
is-
mentioned either one
Yeah,
of those.
you can't. I agree. You can't point to someone. Say God came to you and is like, "Oh, why did they fall away from the faith?" And you said, "Oh, it's purely socioeconomic reasons." That's not fair.
No. So what happens if you just say it as a joke and he's just like, "You're right"? And you're, what?
Okay,
Well,
so
I'd be
because
very
we've
wrong.
been everywhere in these last 5 minutes,
Thanks for writing us down.
let's quickly end this part and then narrow down.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to move
So
towards.
what have we, in quick words, said? Enlightenment,
Yes.
the degradation of
Fundamentalist
of people's trust in religion because of catastrophe,
And failures in religion to answer catastrophe.
failures of the leadership and the church to actually respond to these massive issues in history properly.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly say I actually think the Enlightenment was a good thing overall.
Sure. And then
because I've been ragging on it a lot.
And then, so now that we've covered these aspects, Enlightenment, history, church's response, we can now drop into what are the reasons individuals.
Okay.
Just we've laid down a foundation for what was the
Very sporadic.
yeah
Foundation,
yeah
but
well, yeah. So we've named a lot of things, and what we did was we provided here's the context for which people are leaving. Not the reason individually they're leaving, but the context in which they've arrived at this position.
Sure.
Why are they in this position in the first place? Oh, history has provided a set of ideas, an ocean of pathways, or the amount of
An ocean of pathways.
Yeah.
I like.
Or what it's done is it's created chaos where there should be order. It's created 1,000 versions, 1,000 leaders, or as Paul would say, they will follow who they want. And it's given people
Right.
options
I see.
to go towards the one that they want, the one that they think is best.
Yeah. For better
What it's
or
also
worse.
done is it's created incentive via hardship, catastrophe,
Yeah.
to move in certain directions away from catastrophe.
Yep.
And that sucks because a lot of the times the leadership and the result of those catastrophes has been the church. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Or at least
not,
some of the people.
not
in
World
it.
War II, not these other things, but the Reformation. There was a lot of catastrophe around the church.
Yes, there was.
The amount
There
of
was-
people that got hurt because of fundamentalist lines in the sand.
Yes, and so what you see is there's a bunch of incentives, including the church, the sinful people within the church, which is the whole church, pushing people in a direction, sadly, away from the gospel, and it's created this, what's the word? Environment.
Oh, okay.
Now we get into why are people actually falling away in this environment? Do we have any ideas?
Well, I guess I'll repeat what I said when I interrupted and
How dare
interrupted
you?
Colton. From my experience, the majority of the time that people leave, from what I've watched it, is it's because they don't want to follow Christ's moral examples or the like he says, count the cost in Luke, because there is a cost, and people don't want to.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that includes the moral examples and the orders to do good, meaning tithing, meaning, actually giving grace to people that don't deserve it, because that's what grace is, forgiving people when they ask for it every time. Stuff like that. And so that Christian lifestyle that includes self-sacrifice all the time and
Right.
self-restraint all the time, and people don't want to participate in that. And from what I've seen, that's the majority of the people that have walked away from the faith when I've watched them. But I don't know. What do you guys got thoughts?
It's interesting that this is the topic we landed on, because in the last little while I've been kind of working through. There's a good buddy of mine, but he left the faith a couple of years ago, and we'll call him Brian. And he said something to me that I haven't been able to get out of my head for the last little while, and that was he always saw people coming into the church who were beaten and bruised and basically looked like they didn't really belong anywhere, right? He looked down on people that thought they needed God for help, right? And what he said to me was he couldn't believe in a God that puts people through hell to get to heaven, kind of a thing, right? He doesn't see how God can. He interpreted it as God
Interesting.
making them suffer so that they would follow God,
Right.
right?
Okay.
And he's since come around on it. Yeah, like I thought it was a
Interesting.
pretty. I had never heard it from anyone other than him. But yeah, that was something that's really gotten me. Can't believe a God that would put someone through hell to get to heaven. But since then, we've been talking more and more about it, and he was reading through Job and kind of saw that as
Interesting.
an interest. Yeah, it was a weird. I know
good.
that's super anecdotal and not super specific. We can't apply it to everything like we have so far.
But it is a reason why someone falls away, right?
Yeah, in my personal experience, it is a reason I've been told that somebody left the faith.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, any thoughts on that? Like, should I answer that with the problem of suffering? Should I, I think the best idea was just to tell him to read the Bible, because it wasn't,
As always.
very
usually a good
very
answer.
accustomed to Christian culture, not
Right.
as accustomed to
What the scripture
Scripture.
actually says, yeah.
yeah, which is common.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you think, Josh,
I mean,
about Joel's thing or whatever?
with the CRC church has taken a big hit from young adults leaving the church. So there was a big study done called Renegotiating Faith, which was done across America and then also in Canada. And they came to really cool.
What was it?
Called Renegotiating Faith.
Okay. What
And
did
it was
they do?
they did a big survey and study on why young adults are leaving the church in such massive numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
It's been called like the exodus of the 2000s, the hemorrhaging church, stuff like that. And it was centered around young adults, and there's a really, really cool reason, really interesting reason, specifically for our time period. But I think it's a really, just to like say it is really important. And it's, so there's two things that they found as the core of the problem. When people are not participating in a community, they have no reason to partake in the community. And then second is a normal human function called differentiation. Differentiation is the process by which a child separates from their parent.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's, everybody goes through it. And it's what allows a dependent individual as a baby to become an independent human, not relying on others. And this is usually done physically. You move out of your parents' house, you get a job not at your parents' place, or you spend time away from them with friends and stuff like that, and you become an individual person. You take on skills of yourself.
Okay.
One of the problems is that in the Western world, the age in which young adults move out of their parents' place is becoming later and later in life, to like in their 30s. And so the process of differentiation, when it can't occur physically, it occurs mentally. So what you see is people differentiating ideologically. And you'll see that the same process that goes on in the teenage life of like rebelling against the parents just becomes like they need to create an identity of their own separate from their parents. And instead of that being done physically, it happens mentally. So people end up not believing as a result of this process. Not entirely, right? It's not only because of a physical process.
I'm not saying that that's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not. But people started leaving in the early 1900s.
Correct.
Do you think it's just with, as Colton mentioned, with like the effect of technology, and then Joel even talked about like how that would spread ideas so much faster? Is it we are just in an environment that continues to compound the reasons more,
Absolutely.
more, and so that's why we're having that mass exodus.
And on top of this, the other part is the if they're not partaking in the community. So with the identity and the partaking problem, you've got people when they go to church and their identity is in relationship to their parents. Like they're a 40-year-old man, but they're being described as this man's son.
Yeah.
Instead of by their own name. Or they're just sitting in church for 30 minutes a day, one day a week, instead of partaking in the sound booth or a part of the worship team, or they work in the kitchen, do the coffee, stuff like that. They lose connection to the community, and so they're not a part of the community. Yeah. They're just consuming the community. And so when those two things occur, you see a massive drop-off of young adults because there's a lot of ministry for youth, and then all the ministry drops for the young adults. Yeah. So suddenly, what was holding them there, which was partaking in the community, is now added as a negative against them.
I think that fits into when Joel and you were talking, I realized there's something fundamental that I just forgot to talk about. When people, quote unquote, leave the faith, they've been leaving the faith for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not something that just happens overnight. It's something that's in the works for like months, maybe even years.
Yeah.
People slowly just kind of, that if they don't actively remind themselves of the value and the hope that they have in God, well then, you know? And what you were saying with like, if you're not participating in the culture, and you're just consuming, well, then of course you're not actively seeing the value of participating in that culture, what that brings to you, because half of how you get value out of things is by participation.
Yeah. Well, I think this is also like we've talked about, like the church has had different forms and shapes over time. I think one of the negative aspects of our modern church, or the church where you have a clerical staff, and then the people in the service, like the congregation, just consumes the sermon, or in the singing. They're not partaking in the church itself. Whereas in the house churches of the New Testament, every individual member was partaking in how the church functioned.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think if you have a church that's more traditional there are a set of people that run the church, everybody else just consumes, you're going to see a lot more of that when people hit that young adult stage of life.
When people are actually participating in church, it insulates them against that.
The reasons to leave.
That slow degrading of getting in the mindset to leave. Which is obviously actually where the process of leaving is fought over.
Yeah. Well, and even people will join horrible groups in the search of community. Like,
True.
so like
That's how radicalization happens.
that's how radicalization. That's how gangs happen.
That's how
is
cults
people are
work.
looking for a family, a community. Cults, they give them a group to be a part of.
Some kind of
Yeah.
If you
satisfaction.
ever get targeted by Mormons, though, they'll send pretty girls your way. It's weird.
Or they'll get pretty girls to offer free Bibles on Facebook
I've
Marketplace.
seen
And
that.
cookies.
I've seen
Yeah,
that.
and I hate it because they know what they're doing.
I mean, I'll take the cookies.
Because it would look like, yeah, man, I could do some cookies. Jeepers.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. Mormons suck.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. They're nice people.
Just
I
like
know a lot.
Brandon Sanderson, right?
Yeah, one of the best authors. No, Mormons are
Lost.
lost, but often
mean that
nice
as a
people.
joke.
Often really nice people.
Did you know the FBI used to hire a disproportionate amount of Mormons?
That's because of the globalists, and that's a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yes, I
No.
see.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at this. 'Cause I've been.
We will be inviting one of the Mormons from Marketplace onto the podcast.
Oh, awesome!
No,
Also,
we're not.
I don't think they would appreciate
Also,
it. We just
I
tear
don't
them
mind
apart.
Mormons. They're a lot disproportionately nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little scary nice
One of my
sometimes.
favorite coworkers was a Mormon.
Yeah.
fair
And by
enough.
scary nice, do you mean has like a creepy smile?
Sometimes, but
Like-
I mean more just like
it's-
it's very like it feels like they're smothering you a lot of the time.
Okay, so like imagine like a good American neighbor, but they're like across the street in their house, and it's in like 12 at night, and they're like standing beside each other, waving at you, like "Hey,"
Yeah.
like that creepy.
Okay,
A little bit.
The new James Bond movie. That you know the guy I'm talking about in No Time to Die. The guy
Yeah.
that gets crushed by the car. He plays the perfect
Yes.
Mormon. They haven't even have a line in the movie.
Yeah,
Did you
Anyway,
just spoil No
I'm-
Time to Die?
there's a side character.
Bad guy gets crushed by car.
That happens in everyone.
It was Mormon's time to die.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I totally.
No, this is great. Mormons are fun. So you've got lack of participation in community. You've got that you need not this kind of references our individualistic versus collective idea, but like you need an individualistic. You need to be known individually from the people around you. You're an individual participating in a community.
Yeah.
Those two ideas are super important, and that's why it's hard to classify in a collective or individualistic ideology.
What is
It's
it
the
Freud or
spectrum.
Jung that says you're not a man until your father dies?
Jung.
Is it Jung? Okay, so do
Yeah,
you think
I
that's
really hope so. I'm gonna look it
Yeah,
up.
because I remember what Freud talked
I
about.
think
for
that's
that.
I think that's
okay,
not.
Don't bring up the one Freud idea everybody
I
does.
don't think that's. I think he's onto something, but I don't think it's a culturally you should not be regarded as a man until your father dies.
No,
but
I'm-
more
I'm
is like
gonna-
when a man's father dies, he suddenly realizes he's next in line.
I don't think so. Now hold on. Now
Yeah.
we're probably gonna have all four different opinions on the quote.
Yeah.
This is a bonus, whatever floats your quote.
Yeah.
But I think it is you're not a man until your father dies, and the whole point, and Jordan Peterson gets into this, is if your father can die metaphorically, not literally, then it can. Well, here's the thing: if you can actually realize that your dad is, if you can actually realize where your dad is wrong,
Sure.
that's his whole point. That's what I mean by metaphorically.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It just sounds funny.
Yeah, you're.
But isn't the ideological rebellion that you talk about in differentiation part of the
Yeah.
killing the ideological father.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
that's
why-
what
that's
I'm
why it's
going
so
with.
important.
That's
Okay,
why I'm
cool.
going
On
to.
board
Okay, cool.
together.
High five.
But yes, but no, I think what it is when it goes wrong, like it is in the church sometimes when people leave,
Yeah.
is they're participating in the death of their father.
Damn it was Freud.
Whereas if it's done properly, the differentiation, it's you are becoming a king alongside your father.
Okay.
In the more Christian sense of like co-heirs instead of regicide.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, you get your
So-
portion of the land and then
Yeah.
you work it,
Yeah.
rather than killing the king to get.
And so I think
your
he's
land.
correct,
Oh.
but it's a
Could the rebellion of obviously this
the rebellion of
Is-
Adam
is this
is
breaking
the
down the
regicide
prodigal
instead
son?
of
because
No.
he's asking for his inheritance early.
No.
What?
I think there's
I don't want to get into it. You
I-
might be right.
Are you kidding me?
You
This
might
is the
be-
perfect podcast to talk
Okay,
about the prodigal
this
son.
is
Here's
this
the
is
rub. This has nothing to do with what we're talking
I'm
about.
not
What
sure
do
they
you
talked
mean?
about
It
this
has
at
everything to
Summit.
do with it.
I'm not sure they talked about this at Summit, but did they talk about the idea of like there's an actual truth presented by every story in the Bible, and then there's like other ideas you can come to, but they're not the point. They're just sub ideas that are a part of it.
We haven't talked about it in class, but it's something we've talked about.
Colton and
Primary,
I-
secondary,
yeah.
and complex truths.
Colton and I have talked about it extensively.
Okay, well we'll save that for after the podcast or another podcast. But
It's a fun topic.
anyways, but if we were gonna have that conversation, I would say it was something like that, where it's like it's an idea you can come to, but it's not the point of the thing. It's just when you write a big story, big brain idea,
Yeah.
it's gonna come with trail ideas.
Is it just because human beings are so complex? Is that the whole thing?
We said we weren't gonna get into it, Caleb.
I'm sorry.
Well, with
I don't
all
even know
issues,
what we're not getting into.
remember this.
We'll keep it that way.
The whole topic of this conversation is why do people fall away from
Yeah.
faith? The answer is humans are really complicated. Going back to what you guys are saying,
Yeah.
and so that's why people still have to ask this question.
Yes.
I don't want to get into all this individual minutia because you could go on for literally forever. You guys aren't. You guys aren't. You guys have been talking about some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get focused back into the main point.
Yeah, we've so we have sorry. I have it written down here. We have people don't want Jesus to be king. We have suffering in the world. We have the differentiation from your parents,
Right.
like the people who raised you. You have so we have those three. And you also have not participating in the community. Some more.
Do you think you could draw an analogy to the fall in Genesis 3? In this,
I think that's the entirety of it.
yeah.
Like, so
Yeah, I think everything
say what you're
fits
saying.
within
Say
that.
what you're saying.
Okay,
You could draw it from that, but I don't think it's the main point.
Ooh.
this is a complex
It's a
truth.
secondary complex truth. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a
what's-
tertiary idea.
But what's the primary truth?
Man.
I'm gonna do the tangential proof.
What?
What? Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
Is the idea, and I don't know how abstract you could go, but is the idea that we believe, or we're fooled into, or we accept a belief that is contrary to, let's say, God's organized reality. It's just the fall, and I don't like it. And it's too complex. And the thing is, it's simple, and
okay, so
you go for it because I'm
yeah.
struggling here.
So I think what you're saying is that what we've discussed so far is people don't want Jesus to be king.
Yeah.
That's in relation to people want to decide for themselves what is good and evil.
Yeah.
Partaking of the fruit. There's a lot of suffering in the world. People don't want to die, and when that option is taken away from them, when they're tricked into thinking, "Oh, I won't die," then they're fine. Suddenly they can make a decision that seconds before was horrible. You also have the differentiation from the parents. It's you in taking of the fruit, they are differentiating themselves from God.
Yes. Okay. Good.
What you also
you're on
have
board
is, and then not partaking in the community is in them, instead of working with God, they're now working for themselves. And so you get them, they're making a separation in the community. leaving God in the garden and them out.
Everything that he said, but I just was horrible.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to bounce an idea off you guys that ties in with this. You guys can tell me immediately that I'm wrong, because I probably am. Yeah.
Sorry, one more.
Oh, yeah, go
also,
ahead.
it's choosing leaders of your own desire. They chose the serpent. Anyways, go.
Ah, I see. Okay. With the it kind of get into the idea that people don't really have free will.
Wow,
I'm not going to talk about the full topic.
Starting strong.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the full topic, but people, although everyone has free will, very few people choose to use it. Well, why would you? It's uncomfortable.
Keep talking, man. This is awesome.
It's uncomfortable to think for yourself. You isolate yourself from the rest of the world and what's thought before if you think for yourself. People are so heavily influenced by the world around them. This kind of gets back into a little... So that idea. Now we get into, Caleb, your idea of the whole post-World War I. Well, it's not just your idea, but the one you brought up, the post-World War I. Before that, the world was like, wow, it's really great to live right now. The world's going great. We're working towards a better society. Mm-hmm. Then World War I happens. Everyone goes, oh, shoot, we were completely wrong. Like, the world isn't getting better. It's getting worse. The structures we already have obviously don't work. And so then you have this revolution of ideas that kind of give you different ethical systems because the previous
Just
one
to
didn't
see
work.
whatever sticks at the wall.
Literally, yeah. That's where you get the whole issues with World War II and on from there. But with that, and I know I'm generalizing again, but I think what you guys were talking about the whole like people choosing to obey the serpent or obey God kind of thing, becoming your own king by usurping the king before and stuff like that. I think that the reason why that happens has partially to do with this idea of people don't have free will. They do have free will, but they choose not to use it. And they've been given other options. But because of the cultural hegemony of individualism and the humanism and all of these enlightenment and great modernist values, because of all these things, people still want the illusion that they're in control, but they don't actually want to be in control because they don't want the free will choice to be responsible for their action.
I like that I could take everything that you just said and put it to a bad guy in a kid's movie.
What is that kid's movie?
I don't know. I don't watch kids' movies. I barely watch movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Someone
that's
asked
fair.
me today, what is your favorite Disney movie? And I sat there for blank face for like 30 seconds going, I don't know what's the difference between Pixar and Disney anymore. But
Didn't they buy... Anyways, no, we're not going to get into that.
anyway, Colton,
Everyone, yes.
I think I agree, but I might disagree on so many definitions
Maybe.
I would come at the answer differently.
To bring it all together, people have free will but choose not to use it most of the time. Now, you can disagree with me on that.
Isn't
That's
choosing
fair.
not to use it free will, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've chosen to give it up to someone else. Or
Okay.
to an other system of ethics. That's why
Yeah.
culture exists.
I think that's all the free will that human beings have is to choose to give it up. That's my belief.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah.
That's wild. We should write a book about that.
I think that people...
Thanks, buddy.
Yes, I think for big grand scope, you're absolutely right. But with even individual things, people want to be told what to do. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying that's a good thing or that we should exploit that in any way.
We can go some
People
wild
have
places
done
with
that a lot.
Yeah.
But people want, also because of individualism, they want the illusion that they're the ones controlling their destiny. Now, these other ethical systems that came out of World War I said, yeah, look at, you get to be in control. You're actually contributing to your own life. It's not some God that's doing it for you. It's not some state that's doing it for you. You are the master of your own destiny. Just don't think
The
about
commander of your soul.
Yeah,
There's
just-
a whole poem about it.
Just don't think about it too hard, you know?
Okay.
And because
No.
of that, you get things like people rejecting Christianity for, say, they want, quote unquote, that idea of, like what you were saying, that they can become individual in their mind because they can't physically separate from the parents. They have to mentally, because they want that control. But they latch onto other ideological ideas that are progressive, that are new because it's
like feminism, let's say.
Well, they're tyrants in their own sake.
I mean, extreme feminism is exactly what this problem
And then
is.
it's like, the way God
Guys,
is
We're really segmenting our.
I've been avoiding politics as much as I
No,
can.
hang on. Bear with me.
Yeah.
Bear with me.
Okay.
Okay. There are, wherever you agree on how extreme feminism goes,
Yeah.
it is obvious that there's certain extremes made in the feminist movement that are not compatible, or at least no, I wouldn't
Like
even
third
say
wave
compatible.
feminism.
No, I wouldn't even.
Fourth
I
wave
won't
feminism.
even go there. But there's certain claims. I won't even say compatible. I'll just say difficult to harmonize and
Sure.
difficult to look at the Old Testament and look at how God handles.
Okay, so you're
God
saying
deals with women.
His
As a-
value
and they'll-
systems are in different places.
And they'll look at it and they'll go, I don't know how I can handle what I believe is, let's say, ethical and it has an ideological value system. I don't know how to harmonize that with how God shows himself through the Bible. Is that similar to what you're saying with how they latch on to a different ideological system that...
Well, the reason why I bring this up is because this harmonizes really well with what Joel was saying about how people want to rebel against God. They don't, like you kind of talked, at least around it.
I just want to ground that into an example.
Yeah.
Right.
What's up?
That's great. I believe Joel wanted to say something.
It was going to be along the same lines. I was reading a book called Identity and Idolatry by Chester Beale. Is that his name? Something like that. You can find it. It's the New Studies in Biblical Theology. Love that series. But it talks about the replacing of idols. In the same sense that there are idols in the Old Testament, we have now created a system where we try to place a sacredness on the individual.
Yes.
And the subtext to that title is the inversion of the image of God. So it is the misuse of the image of God as God itself, that we have somehow turned it around so we now worship ourselves, right? The whole, you've heard it, like, God created us in his image and we returned the favor. Like, you've heard that one before? Like, yeah, so...
Which is a dope line.
Yeah, it's an excellent line. That's going to be in a sermon, probably a couple of sermons that I preach. But isn't that kind of the issue that we come up with, is people see themselves as sacred to the point where they desire their own worship and the worship of those around them, which is why they adopt ideologies that complement themselves?
Well,
Yes.
I think they'll only worship
is that
God.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
To an
They'll
extent.
only worship God as long as God looks very similar to them.
Or at least
Which
will
means-
benefit them the most.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That they think.
No, I like that.
Just want to stop you right there.
Yeah. No.
I
James.
completely
That's a fun
agree.
idea.
I completely agree. Okay, so we have people don't want Jesus to be king, suffering in the world, differentiation from parents, not partaking in the community, choosing your own God, fear, free will only to choose who their master is. Is there anything else? I'm starting to see some of these blend together.
Yeah,
like
I think a lot of them
choosing
are a
your own
similar
God.
idea.
Well, and then if you were to actually overlay a theological frame, I bet you they'd all kind of merge into one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, I just wrote like a connection to all of them as the fall in Genesis 3 being choosing for yourself what is good.
I
and evil.
thought
Well, we
I
could-
thought your tying those into Genesis 3 was super impressive.
Yeah.
We
I
could
tried to do it, and then I was just like, ah.
maybe we could bring this back to a Bible story. The prodigal son, Joel. We got to talk about
Oh
it.
man, that's awesome! You guys finally got it. No, we can stick with the fall narrative.
Yeah. No.
Well, no. I think we've done the fall narrative.
Yeah,
What do you see?
I wanted to do the prodigal
What
son
do you
because
see
I
in
like.
the prodigal son that matches that stuff, or not just that stuff, but people walking?
It
away?
was more about leaving the ideology or leaving the house of your father, leaving the place that you're comfortable, and basically trying to
To try to be a master of your own life.
Okay, replace a system that once served a very specific purpose in your life with essentially hedonism,
Yep.
Oh, okay.
right? Like
Yep,
that
no,
was
I-
that was
okay.
my point.
Yeah,
is,
so
my
I
point
thought
too.
is
I thought
the
you were going a
prodigal son
complete different
was
way.
an example of differentiation in Scripture.
Yeah.
So what we've got for this is differentiation,
Extreme differentiation.
man.
Which is interesting because the previous ideology is still the thing that enables him to go about his hedonistic lifestyle.
Isn't it weird? It's the fruits of the previous ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
having your cake and eat it too.
Well,
Yeah.
no. This is the point of
The West.
This is the point of Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson and others is that Christianity, in its attempt to pursue truth, destroyed itself.
Wait, is culture just the returning prodigal son right now?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in its attempt to seek truth,
Yeah.
at the humility of the pride, like of saying I know, has produced first of all the scientific method, but whatever. And then in turn,
Whatever.
and then in turn, more broadly, this idea that we can now reject the orthodoxy.
Yep.
And so
That nothing is sacred.
Christianity produced its own demise.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a super interesting thought.
Sinful Christians produced their own demise. Not yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, because culture latched onto very specific things that Christians are like, yeah, that's cool. Again, things
Yeah.
like individualism, and then just took it so far.
okay. So we have this. Go.
I don't know if you were going to talk about anything more to do with this,
Yes.
but because we've talked a lot about like general ideas or even like the reasons we think people fall away. But what are the reasons people give for why they fall away, and why are they good reasons, bad reasons, stuff like that? Do we want to get into that?
Well, I think what we could do, like as a good segue, is like, for example, is
My
like,
mom died. That's a good reason.
yeah. So that with the reasons we've come up with, these are like, typical, like, not archetypal, typal. What's
Typical.
the
Typological.
typological
Typical,
reasons? So like these are like all-encompassing ideas, and people will have specific versions of these.
Yeah.
So like, for example, my mother died, catastrophe, suffering in the
It's
world.
a type, yeah.
Yeah. What is an example of differentiation? The prodigal son.
Sure.
Do you guys know any people that?
I'm.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't mean to point you out, Caleb, but did you at any point in time as a pastor's kid?
Oh, actually, yeah, no. Wow. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, no, because it wasn't like so in the span of me. Hold on, I have to rethink this now.
Not to share your testimony.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Come on.
I never really thought about me as a subject. Yeah, no, because I still believed in God, but I didn't want to be my dad. I didn't want to be my brother either. But it was this, I
When was
didn't
this?
want. So when I moved out of my parents' place when I was 19, and so
Okay.
I walked away from my. Yeah.
Okay.
It had more to do with the brand of Christianity that he had, which I thought was just the way it was. Maybe that was also an excuse because I don't think I actually truly knew that. It was what I chose to believe. I think it would have been a little bit of, I'm going to go out and forge my own, I guess, ideological system to a certain degree of what Colton was saying.
I'm gonna go make some
Values.
memes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, because I didn't want to be my
Master
brother.
of your own domain.
Yeah,
kind of
I
thing.
didn't want to be my own brother, or not my own brother. Yeah, I didn't want to follow that train of thought, but I didn't want to just be my dad.
Right.
And so that's why I moved halfway across the second largest country in the world.
Yeah. So this is, I think, a classic example. Not to say you're classic.
Oh, I'm classy.
Classic.
Of like
That's what you
of
said,
a
right?
differentiation process, because you see this a lot with pastors' kids.
Yeah.
Of like they need to separate.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that's a great example of differentiation that we see, not just young adults, but
Well, I would even think to a certain degree that my brother probably did the same thing. It's just it manifested very differently in our lives.
yeah.
I think a very good case study for something like this, as accurate as it could or couldn't be, is my family. My extended family on my mom's side is made up of parents who are all pastors. Like my grandparents are all pastors except for my grandmother.
Yeah.
And then their kids are all pastors or pastors' kids or whatever. Or I should say, rather than all of them, half of them. Because half of them continued to be like their parents, and the other half really didn't want to be. Which goes into this idea of that you're talking about they didn't want to be their parents because they focused on the flaws of their parents, whereas the others didn't think about it as much.
Well, and the weird thing with mine is I didn't think that my dad was necessarily wrong.
Right.
But I just didn't think it didn't work. I just
Well,
didn't
yeah.
see the fruit
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, that's industriousness. Yeah.
Which I'm really low in, which is weird. But
Yeah, okay, so
don't
we've
know.
got that.
Okay, so we have
Differentiation. We've got
Differentiation.
Caleb, we've got
Colton's extended family.
Yeah. So like pastors' kids, young adults.
Not to bring up a second example, but when I was a kid, I think a lot of the reason why I like talking about things like apologetics or even just this stuff here is because I grew up with a lot of atheist or non-religious friends, and so I had these kinds of talks with them a good amount of time. Everyone gave very different reasons as to why they don't believe. I think the most common reason I was given was I just don't want to.
Well,
It doesn't.
I
I
think that's
don't.
the
It doesn't
Jesus is
align
king,
with what I
right?
want.
Well, that's the Jesus is king thing.
Yeah. So
Now, there's different examples specifically of how that comes out, but that's what it boils down to is that's not what I wanted for my life.
Yeah. I don't. Well, it's the Frank Sinatra thing. What is a man? What has he got if not himself?
Right.
And he has not.
Yeah,
to
my
say
way,
the
yeah.
words
Yeah.
he truly feels, not the words of one who kneels.
I did it my way.
Wow.
Thank you for coming to my concert. Everybody.
Wow. Now sing it.
So people don't want Jesus to be king.
Right, Frank Sinatra.
Next week we're gonna have Frank Sinatra on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, we get to bring up his corpse. Great.
Oh
No, we can get
Sounds
the hologram that was in Vegas in Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, you're right.
oh yeah.
That's a wild movie.
I love that movie.
Anyway, what's the next one?
So we have people don't want Jesus to be king. You gave the classic example of young people who go to atheism or more individualistic ideologies of like, yeah, I don't want what he wants. I want what I want.
I think something that should be clarified is that people typically don't just say, I don't want to. They say things like, oh, I think that this moral thing is bad, and they'll intellectualize it. The whole topic of like what exactly people say, I think, is that people give reasons that are intellectual, things like the problem of pain, things like the teleological or cosmological arguments that you guys talked about yesterday and stuff like last time. But those aren't really the reasons why. That's why we've gone into this whole tirade about all these deeper meanings, is because people give excuses for deeper, heartfelt reasons.
Well, yeah, because they're not like you said, thinking through the responsibility.
Again,
of
people don't really have free will. They've already come to this conclusion and they're intellectualizing it.
Okay, I don't.
Sure.
You can continually
No.
bring that up, but I am not totally comfortable with it because I
I
think
know.
it's too simplistic.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
fair enough.
But what I was getting at was like, yeah, people. I mean, other people have brought this up. Like, people don't really think. What we call thinking is responding to like thoughts that appear in our head.
Yeah, no such thing as an original thought.
Yeah. Whereas people who think, they're doing a version of a Socratic dialogue where they're presenting ideas and giving arguments in their heads and actually thinking about the conversations or the places it could go, rather than they hear an idea and they go, I don't like that, and then say that idea, because that's just a feeling. That's feeling put to words.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I agree with you there. On the free will part, maybe not. That's wild from a Calvinist. But anyways.
We're gonna have to talk about
Are
that
you
another
John
day.
Calvin
Yeah.
himself?
Yeah.
Oh.
My name's
Wow.
Josh, but my name's
Josh
Calvin.
Calvin.
Josh Calvin. So people don't... Okay, so you gave us an example, just quickly,
Who's
of
you?
suffering in the world. Joel.
Suffering the world. From a buddy Brian.
Yeah.
Not his name, but we're going with it.
Yeah.
You know who you are. Thanks for listening to the podcast, buddy. He
Thank
might
you.
actually listen to this, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wonder if my brother's going to talk to me about this.
We'll see.
Brian, I hope you're doing well.
It's an interesting situation because we were kind of on the same path in life for a little while, and then it deviated real quick. So
understand that,
I
yeah.
think Christianity's picking up your cross daily, and when you neglect to do that, you fall away. Right?
Yeah.
When you start to neglect things like the Christian family, right? Being partaking in a larger community. When you separate yourself from that community, good luck. We
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit before we started the podcast. If you're not like actively participating in the life of the church, it's going to be very difficult for you in your walk with God.
Well,
because even then, it doesn't matter if you don't agree with the pastor when you go to church. You're not even going to be challenged. You're not going to have anything to think about, right? So it's this thing. If we don't have this dialogue within ourselves,
Yeah.
Well, not to date this podcast too hard, but because we live in a very interesting time with COVID-19 and all that. That at the we're kind of coming up. I hope to the tail end of it.
Oh,
But we don't.
just beginning.
Oh gosh, we see people stop going to church en masse.
Yep.
Crazy amounts. And right now, we don't know what the fallout of that's going to be like.
It's estimated 20%, but I think that's rather.
Yeah, but how much is this going to change church and how it's done
Oh, that,
forever?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of rise of online.
Yeah.
But
it's just like right now,
Yeah,
I'm bringing it up because the whole
COVID.
what you're talking about the community.
So that was.
How's that going to work?
not partaking in the community.
Okay, COVID.
But we also have, like, for an example of not partaking in the community, you gave, like, the whole world was just forced into not partaking. If
By
their
its own
countries,
means.
yeah.
By its own cultural.
And when I say
ideas.
partaking, I don't mean watching the sermon. I don't
Yeah.
mean just thinking about it.
Maybe
I
even
mean,
being
like,
involved with people.
well, for a lot of people, the church
Serving.
is the primary means by which they help their community as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? Like
sure.
there are larger functions to the church than just intellectual thought. And once
Yeah.
you fall away from that, it's not even going to be a conscious thing. You're just
That's a
not
good point.
going to be challenged.
Yeah.
And from a, that's a very pragmatic view.
Yeah.
I realize
it's
that.
fair.
Well, maybe the most we've actually brought up.
Well, I've brought up, I mean, I haven't discussed any personal stories yet, but, like, there are people in my church. We're a very volunteer-led church. Every ministry is run by volunteers.
It's true. Don't discredit your volunteers. They
My
do their
church is
work.
90%, like, volunteer, like, participation.
not you, just people.
Yeah.
listening.
But there are a few people that they're like, they will say that the church is not doing anything for them.
Yeah.
And then you'll say, hey, you should come to this young adults event. Hey, you should come to this youth event. Hey, you should come to this thing. And then they won't respond, and then they won't show up. And it's because of that idea of they have a river flowing in, but no rivers flowing out. They're going to turn into the Dead Sea. And so you have that problem where you have people that desire something from the church, but they and there's a part of failure here in the church. We haven't done a good job at explaining how partaking in the church is how you get from the church.
Yeah. Ask not what the church can do for you, but what you
You
can do for the
your
church.
Yes.
JFK.
Cut that.
What? Why?
No, I'm kidding. That was excellent.
was
I'm sorry.
awesome.
I'm
That's the
sorry.
intro now,
It was weirdly unanimous.
So that was not partaking in the community. That was point 4.
Yeah,
Point
not
5.
partaking in the community. Part 5 is, well, choosing your own God. That's kind of the same as people don't want Jesus to be king.
Okay.
So we can,
Like sub point almost of.
yeah. Fear.
And
What?
whose is fear?
that's why I'm confused.
Was that?
Yeah.
Like the fear of responsibility?
Sure.
Or is this like a "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear" kind of a thing?
What?
No, I think it's like
No, that's a good song.
That's a good song. Yeah, I'm talking.
they're afraid of the ramifications. Like Jordan Peterson's going through this where he talks about, like, the idea of Jesus and God being real is terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you when you attempt at contemplating it.
Is the whole existential dread kind of idea.
Yeah.
That if you commit to Christianity, you have to reorganize
Yeah,
how
it's
you think about existence.
The fear of commitment, the fear
Sure.
of
Sure.
a relationship, the fear of
This is a good example.
exposure, the fear of having your sins revealed to the world. You might have done a lot of horrible things, and having that presented to somebody else is a horrific idea, especially when we're supposed to be running biologically from danger.
True. And
Sure.
if it's something we don't, like, someone doesn't really understand, I think a good example would be like, you have to pick, you have two job like someone's offered you two jobs and you got to choose one of them. Like, yeah, that is terrifying. Do I choose this job? But what if the other one's going to be better for my future? But what if this one's just a bad
Safer.
environment, safer, stuff like that? That's a job. That's something that benefits you.
Well-
With Christianity, it seems like you're putting your weight into not even your life itself, at least at first.
Well, I can't.
The weight of importance, I should say.
There's a lot of people that I've met and whatnot in churches and in points in their life where they see the benefits of accepting Christ. the life that comes with it. They even want to believe, but there's this but they're exactly what you're talking about. They're scared to because of the weight of what comes, and it's I think that it actually is almost to the point of better the devil you don't know than the potential devil that you. Or better the devil that you know than the potential devil.
No, we shouldn't be talking.
You're right,
God to the devil.
Yeah, you're right. But
Bad analogy.
No, great analogy. Because Jesus is not a devil.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, no. If we wanted to make this completely legit, it would be better the devil you don't know than the God you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because then that's the actual scenario.
Yeah. Okay.
Fair enough.
But
you
yeah,
get to live in ignorance for a little bit longer.
Interestingly enough, as far as I can tell, the majority of the people that would fit into that category are you have people that would be drug addicts or
That's a great title.
would be drug addicts, alcoholics, that type of stuff, because they want salvation from the thing that they have identified as destroying their life, but the idea of actually making God king, even if they kind of want that, the implications of it are scary.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot.
Well, and this brings us to the other one, which is your point, which is choice only for a master.
Yeah.
Oh, it's free will thing.
Well,
Yeah.
again, ignorance is bliss. It's a adage talked about around, but that also works for willful ignorance too. The idea that life feels safer when you don't know the horrors outside your door. And so people are more willing to give up their knowledge of the horrors to someone else in an ethical system or a community so that they can feel safer for one more day. With Christianity, to take that radical change means confronting those things outside your door.
Would we to separate this from the other ideas that we've presented, do we want to say instead of fear of what's outside the door, but rather the task is hard?
Would that just fit into fear, kind of?
No, I think
I think people are genuinely afraid of what it means to live in a completely new world.
But that would fit into fear.
Yeah.
You're getting into...
What I'm saying is the choice of your own master is easy. Somebody else can take the responsibility for me.
Yeah.
It's like there's choosing... There's fear of judgment and fear of God and fear of having to make decisions. And then there's, I just don't want to.
Yeah.
Like it's difficult. I have to make a choice. Oh, let somebody else do that for me.
Right.
And so what people end up becoming is just like, oh, I'll let this group decide for me what I can and cannot do. And that's easy.
I think that's probably the more common. People aren't living in. Okay, a good amount of people are living in existential dread every day, but most people aren't. They're saying, "Oh, that sounds like a commitment." Oh, you mean I have to get up? No, I don't want to do that. That kind of thing. Even Christians do it.
Is that our last point?
Yes.
So just to recap, do you mind reading those out?
Yes. So we have differentiation. Examples are Caleb as a pastor's kid and other pastors' kids and young adults who, when they're transitioning in life, they make this separation from the people before them. You also have people don't want Jesus to be king. A lot of atheists rejecting morally or ethically or historically ideas presented to them away from Christianity. Then there's a lot of suffering in the world, and people can't come to grips with the fact that God would allow such things, or they see pain in themselves, and they're consumed by the hatred of the pain that it's everything is awful. And so the focus is shifted away from good things, and that's a tragedy. Not partaking in the community, i.e. with COVID, a lot of people weren't able to do so, but also people not partaking because they're in a consumer mindset where they want something from the church, not knowing that giving something into the church is how they get. And then you have fear and denial, the fear of exposure, of your sins being let go, of a God who judges. Better the devil you don't know than the God you do. And then choice only for a master. It's easy to have someone make your choices for you, because choosing things, taking our responsibility, is difficult. It takes time, effort, energy.
Yep.
And those things I don't want to use.
Yep.
Well, guys, I think we flopped around our topic rather well, which is weird because we
I
don't
really
normally.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't think we
Yeah.
don't normally flop about really well, but we're really close to our time limit, so we'll squeeze the whatever floats your quote in real close.
Okay.
Anybody have any concluding statements to say about this first?
I was thinking about Joshua 24, which is just choose this day who you will serve, or whom you will serve, right?
Yeah.
That there is an explicit command in Scripture to not just flop about, but to choose the path of righteousness or salvation. Or
The
You
trick,
may
however you wanna
choose-
put it.
the trick is asking that question every day.
Yeah, it's the picking up your cross daily. You can
Yeah,
kind of mix
yeah.
those back and forth.
Yeah.
You may choose this, you may choose this, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Is that?
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that is?
no, it's
Yeah.
you can choose the God of your ancestors, the God of the Amorites type deal.
So for whatever floats your quote,
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go with what appears to be we're a little book club of them because it mentions every podcast.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, talking about Christianity of all things. His quote is, "Neither this belief nor any other will automatically remain alive in the mind. It must be fed. And as a matter of fact, if you examine 100 people who had just lost their faith in Christianity, I wonder how many of them would turn out to have been reasoned out of it by honest argument, or
Mm-hmm.
do not most people just simply slowly drift away?"
Absolutely. And I think all of us tried to give reasons for that because
It's
people.
a slow fade when you give yourself away.
5.
Well, if you
Second high five.
if you pay attention to most sermons, as I don't, it you get a lot of this, like a lot of fear mongering a lot of the time. Like, oh, be careful, the devil might be hiding around every corner. But that's not the thing that happens in most sermons. A lot of it is this, no, like carrying up your cross daily, making sure you are continuing because you are being slowly led away. It's not going to be one big thing that changes you from 99% of people. It's going to be a slow transition away from what you want to actually be. Like,
Well, yeah, it's-
goodness
Black
that
and
you
white
have.
will turn to gray, you know.
Man, that crisp high five looks so good on our sound recording.
Well,
Yeah,
it
we're
sound
gonna-
good too.
We're gonna cut
Yeah,
that
it's
out.
the road to hell is a gradual one. Yes. You also have like you can't like it's hard for an individual to like fully think out every single idea at all times and in all places. And devil will slowly take away when you're not looking the area behind
I
you.
got tired when you said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not supposed to be a discouragement. It's
Yeah.
supposed to say, those of you who are actually thinking about it and those of you who are pursuing this, you are doing the right thing. As if you are challenging yourself and trying to carry across
Yeah,
cross daily, that is essentially all you're being asked to do.
If any of
is to try.
If any of these ideas are even popping into your head, it means you're on the you're in the right direction.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Again, C.S. Lewis, Christianity is a thinking man's religion.
Also, like a lot of these reasons, a lot of these are somewhat out of your control, and some of them are within your control. These big grand ideas of sociology and stuff are, like, obviously there's not much you can do about that. But honestly, you as an individual, all we can do is try, and trying is all we're essentially asked to do, to be better people and to follow Christ. So yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. Well,
I had a
thank you
point
for
there.
listening to the 4th episode of Second Rate Saints. Yeah, hopefully you can catch us next time. Share it with your friends. Leave a like, subscribe probably. I'm even subscribed so that you could be,
Wow.
same thing
I'm
that I
not.
do.
I subscribed today, actually.
Guys,
No, I am.
I'm still subscribed, but I'm not partaking in my Instagram account anymore, so
Fair enough.
that's
That's okay. I don't
Is
think
that like
it goes.
partaking in communion?
no.
Anyway, we'll see you next time. Probably next week with
We'll
the 5th
see you
episode.
when we see it. You know,
In the future.
I won't see you,
Leave a
and you
comment.
won't see me because this is just audio.
Fear.